Today I want to talk about site bootstrapping for SXA. It's something that I find very useful, and it's one of the real appeals for leveraging SXA as kind of a framework for how you build modules and how you make sure that you can create sites that really maximize reuse. So you may remember from a previous video, if we go to insert a new site, it gives us this little modules list. And of the list, our sample feature is set there, and it's automatically checked. And I want to show you what happens when you install it and kind of how you control that and what are the settings you need to be aware of. So all the settings for bootstrapping are located under System, Settings, Feature. There's also Foundation, which I'll show you as well, which is also involved. So one of the things I did is if we look at our sample feature site setup, there's a number of things we want to do. So one of the things we want to do is add available renderings. So how does it know what renderings to make available? So this is actually a custom branch that was created to set what renderings need to be added. So you'll have to do this, and you should follow your Helix rules. So if we go under templates, we can see under branches, under feature, we have our sample feature. And you can see we have sample feature available renderings. And if I look under here, we can see in the default, we are setting the sample categories and the sample content list components to be available renderings. So this is an example of that branch template. But what this does, what this does is it adds that particular branch template to the available renderings folder under the site, and it names it sample feature. So that's how you set a setting on site creation or on feature activation that will go create a new item called available renderings. And just to look within a site, you can see under presentation, available renderings, there is a sample feature which is set to that. So I didn't create this manually, the bootstrapper did. What other things need to get created? Well, we also have to set up our variants. So there's sample category variants and sample content list variants. And in both cases, you can see that it adds to the rendering variants folder a particular branch template, which is also defined down here. And you can see here's sample content variants where I kind of set the name, I set a default and set a category name. And here, kind of the same thing, but with the title. So you can really create pretty complex structures that become inherently reusable when you do it that way. The last thing is creating the content list folder. Now, this is not a branch template. There's actually a folder template, which you may remember from an earlier item. So under templates, feature, sample feature, there is a folder template that I created, and you want to set the insert options and things like that. So it's essentially creating a folder of that type under the data folder so that I have the insert option set up properly, and I actually saw the content above it. Now, there's a couple other things you'll need to do when you define the feature. One of the things I always do is add a dependency, because if you run this as is, you'll note some of these things don't actually get created. And that's because it'll basically just run these in kind of an undeterministic order. So what you want to do is add at least one dependency on something that you know gets created properly. And in my case, I mean, these are components. So what I actually ended up doing is went to the SXA feature. And the one that I always like to use is the page content one. So if we look at page content site setup, I just grabbed the add available renderings from there, because I know that if my page content components are added, I can add my component because everything else should be set up by then. There is some timing things that you need to consider. The other thing you can choose to do is whether you want to include it by default, right? Whether you want to check automatically or you want to make content authors checked it. Now this I'll show you, I actually use this on the foundational module, right? Sometimes you may want to have an item only get added, like a foundational module would get added if the feature gets added. So let me show you how that works. So so with the foundation module, you'll note that there wasn't a checkbox to select that. And the reason that is is even though I actually have a couple of things I want to do. So the foundation module defines the two types, the sample content, the sample content categories, as well as the folders that you need to actually store those in there. So similar to the feature, we have the settings to go add the data folder and add the folder template, which have the standard values with the right insert options of that type. Same thing for the content folder. But two things I wanted to get done with this is one, I wanted to basically tie it to include if the feature was installed. So what I essentially did there is went to my sample feature, went to my sample site, and clicked that over so that if the feature is checked, then the foundation automatically gets installed without you explicitly having to do that. So you should think through that, think through the dependencies, think through the include if installed so that you're providing the best experience for installing your module. Because in the end, what I expect you'll have is a bunch of modules that are installable onto site. So as you go and create a new site, you can think about what modules you want, and if the dependencies are all configured properly and everything like that works, you'll have that flexibility to choose, I want this, but not this, and I want this, but not that. And that'll set the site up for you so you be productive without having to have any manual steps to go do that. And there are plenty of other options in terms of things that you can do. There are scripts if you want to do PowerShell. There are things you can do with themes. So there's a lot of flexibility there, although in most cases, a lot of what you'll do is just adding items. And that's it. Thanks.